Okay, I think we shall begin. We're learning a sicha in Chelik Chav Hey. Hold on just 1 second, please. Okay, Sterny, we just made you a host so you can record it.
Okay.
Okay, everyone. We're in Parshas Toldos, and it says, Yedua d'mayme Chazal kol ma she'ira la'avei siman labanim. There's a famous saying that everything that occurred to the Avos occurs to Banim, meaning we as descendants of the Avos, what occurred to them occurs to us, and we get the strength to deal with it from them. As the Ramban elaborates on this, and the Ramban explains and elaborates on this, that many of the things that occurred with the Avos allude to so many of the things that occurred later on in the history of Klal Yisrael. And therefore, since the Chazal make reference to this, to these ideas as those things of the Avos, the fathers, Ubanim, and the children, but the Inyan Ha'av and Ibigigam B'Yerushal Ubanav Achrav, those things of the fathers are transmitted to the children as an inheritance. Is moving Adimaisa Avis is Nishtam Asimin Ba'alma. So this implies that it's not just a sign as to what is going to happen with the children, but it's also an empowerment that the Avis, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov empower us, their inheritors, to be able to deal with the different challenges that we have throughout our lives. So, having said that, regarding our Parsha, the Torah erzählt as Vayihira of Ba'aretz. The Torah tells us that there was a hunger in the land. And this was in Eretz Yisrael. Und as B'shayches mit dem hat der Rebischte sich bei Wissen zu Yitzchak und ihm angesagt. And regarding this hunger, Hashem reveals himself to Yitzchak and commands him, Al Teiret Mitzrayma, Shchein Ba'aretz asher Eimar Eilecha, Gur Ba'aretz Hazeis, Ve'eya Imcha V'Avaracheka. Torah tells us that Hashem instructs Yitzchak, don't go down to Mitzrayim. Shchein Ba'aretz, stay in your land, stay in Eretz Yisrael, and Gur Ba'aretz Hazeis, live here, and I will be with you, and I will bless you. So that's what the pasuk says. So the Chazal explain, as we bald that since Yitzchak was a carbon, he was ready to be brought as a sacrifice. He was dedicated as a sacrifice of Hashem. That's why, as a sacrifice, he had a special kedusha, and he had to remain in Eretz Yisrael. And Hashem says to him, "Do not go down to Mitzrayim." Chutz la'aretz, outside of Eretz Yisrael, is not a place for you to be, in spite of the fact that your father Avraham did do that at a hunger, but you remain in Eretz Yisrael. Was the similar banim is not clear. So what's the message to us as children of Yitzchak? So it's clear. In a very revealed ways, we see a very clear sign, a clear message, that emes ha'od von Eden is nicht Golus, that the true place of a Yid is not in Golus, not in Mitzrayim. Nor, when sie sind al Shulchan Avim, the place for Yidden to be is at the table of their fathers, which is in Eretz Yisrael. That the Father, Hashem, takes us and brings us to his home, to our home in Eretz Yisrael. Und darüber afilu in dem Zman, wenn mipnei chatarinu galinu me'artzeinu. And even when we are in Golus, we ought to recognize banim shegalu me'al shulchan avim, that we are children that were exiled from the table of our fathers. So we really belong in Eretz Yisrael. Können Iden nicht sein zufrieden, chas v'sholem. So in Chutz La'aretz, outside of Eretz Yisrael, we can't be satisfied. When I feel in Golus, we can't be comfortable in Golus. Wissendig, das ist nicht der Matzev, in welcher sie davon sein. We can't be comfortable in Golus. You know, if Eden became comfortable because we had a president like Trump, Hashem says, wait a second, don't get comfortable. We can have Biden, I can deal with that too, and don't worry about it, I'm in charge. No, sie hoffen und beten zum Umkehren sich al yedei aviyam l'shulchan aviyam. Yidden, the way Yidden act, they continuously have this tremendous desire to be able to come back to Eretz Yisrael, to Shulchan Aviyam, to the table of their fathers. Biz, as he said in das Mevakish v'tivei gimel pamim b'chol yoyim, to the point where we ask for it 3 times a day, as tzemach david abdecham heiros atzmiach. Every day we ask 3 times in davening that Hashem should bring back Eretz Yisrael for us. On b'chol yoyim eich b'Shabbos v'yantiv, every single day, even on Shabbos and Yantiv, we say, that our eyes should see as we return to Eretz Yisrael. So we continuously remember and keep in mind that this is not our place. Our place is Eretz Yisrael, and that's where we belong, and that's where we ought to return. And that's one of the reasons that Rabbi says, it says that when Mashiach will come, the Gemara tells us that we're going to say, you know, we know Avram Avinu, Yitzchak Avinu, Yaakov Avinu, about all of them we say Avinu, our father. But it says when Mashiach comes, we're specifically going to say to Yitzchak ki ata Avinu, that you are our father. More so than Avram, more so than Yaakov. Why? But demelt wird bei Eden sich ans and begoli die Meiles hat mimus shleimus. Because just like Yitzchak, he was a sacrifice and couldn't leave Eretz Yisrael, and he recognized that, and Hashem instructed him, you don't belong outside of Eretz Yisrael. So when Mashiach comes, we'll all feel the same way, that this is our place, that's where we belong. We need to be next to our Father in Eretz Yisrael. Was der Koyach of the Ruf Napman von Yitzchak Avinu? Where do we get the power to feel that way, that this is where we belong? We get it from Yitzchak. Because just like Yitzchak was an Oyla Tamima, he was a sacrifice and could not leave Eretz Yisrael, as Hashem instructs him now. Clearly, remain in Eretz Yisrael, do not go to Mitzrayim. So too, we inherit that from him, that we too belong in Eretz Yisrael. Und der Pfarr gefinden sich beim Kaimer Mamiti Shulchan Avim in Eretz Yisrael. And that's where we belong in Eretz Yisrael. Was der Inyan zu sein Blaze in Eretz Yisrael is given dafke by Yitzchak. This idea that Yitzchak needed to be only in Eretz Yisrael, we find only with Yitzchak. Mashenke by Avraham und Yaakov, seinen Gewinnsmannen, wenn sie haben sich gefunden bei Chutz La'aretz. With Avraham and Yaakov, there were times when they left Eretz Yisrael. Yitzchak, though, was always in Eretz Yisrael. And similar, with all of Klal Yisrael, we sometimes find ourselves outside of Eretz Yisrael, but even when we are, we recognize this is not our home. This is not our place. We belong in Eretz Yisrael. Since we know that Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are the ones that are referred to as our fathers presently, today, and this is something that we recognize now and forever, that Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, all of them are our fathers. Is moving, as praten von Meisja Oveis, was dirke Neus in Jane am Juchad von jeden eine von die Oveis, is as Simon ben Sinis Kelech Labanim. So obviously then, on the one hand, we say we're like Yitzchak, just like Yitzchak didn't leave Eretz Yisrael, we too have to always feel like we belong in Eretz Yisrael. But at the same time, we're saying Avraham and Yaakov did leave Eretz Yisrael. So we need to think about how is it that we have within us both the idea of Yitzchak, which we just talked about. At the same time, we also have something of Avraham and Yaakov, which is that they did leave Eretz Yisrael. So the Rebbe is going to go now try to explain to us what that means. What is it that we have within us from Avraham, from Yitzchak, and from Yaakov? So the Rebbe says, let's talk about what the explanation for this is. Generally speaking, Yidden are separated, divided up into two categories rather. Yisachar and Zvulun. There are those from tribe Yisachar, and there are those that come from tribe Zavulun. What's the difference? So we know Yisachar were Mori Torah. They were those that sat and learned. That was Shevet Yisachar. They were the ones that sat and learned. And Zvulun were the ones that were Mori Uvden Tavin. They were the ones that did good deeds. They went out into the world. They were involved in Parnasa out in the world out there. And they were always doing good things out there aside from just sitting and learning Torah. So we have that all throughout the ages, all throughout the history. There are those Yidden that sit and learn, and there are those that are out there doing good things, sitting and learning on occasion as well, but mostly involved in business. Not everybody sits in kollel all day. Not everybody's a teacher. Not everybody can sit and learn all day. Most of the people are actually people from Shevet Zavulun. They're the ones out there earning a parnasa, earning a living out there in the world the majority of the day. So the Yidden are divided into, as a rule, Yisachar and Zvulun. Those involved in Torah and those involved mostly in business. Eden was a Ikeresik Bavidus Hashem is bifnim, Yisachar Bayalecha. There are those Jews that the majority of their day is involving Yisachar Bayalecha. They sit in yeshiva, they sit in shul, they sit and learn. They find themselves continuously, or the majority of their time, in their true home, in a shul, in a yeshiva, sitting and learning. On Eden Bali Yasek, and then you have those Jews that are Bali Yasek, the business people out there, who leave their places of Torah. They don't find themselves necessarily in the places of Torah all day. They start off by davening in shul, but then they go out into the world. Zvulun b'tzeisacha, as it says about Zvulun b'tzeisacha, they go out into the world. And they deal with the worldly activities. They go out into the world. And by them going out into the world and doing the things that they need to in the world out there for the sake of Hashem, and they permeate everything they've done with Kedusha, so the Zavulun people are the ones that permeate the physical world with Kedusha. So you have the Zvuluns that are, the Yisachars rather, that sit and learn all day, always involved in learning in Torah. And then you have the Zvuluns that are involved in the world, but permeating the world with Kedusha and with mitzvahs, Torah and mitzvahs. Und da sind in die zwei Sugi Avodah, but der Koyach zu durchfinden sei, bekommt ja der Iden von der Ovis. And these are the two types of services in Avodas Hashem that all of Bnei Yisrael receive, are empowered by the Ovis to be able to follow through in one of the two. Avraham Avinu, what do we get from Avraham Avinu? Is Aruis von Eretz Yisrael, und abgeniddet in Mitzrayim. Avraham Avinu left Eretz Yisrael and went down to Mitzrayim. In Mitzarim Ugvulim Chutz La'aretz, he went down into the limitations of the world outside of Eretz Yisrael. Und hat Bavidase aufgetan, als dort und al derach zeh noch vor dem soll Menschen anerkennen und dienen dem Eibishten. What did he do? He went out into the world and served Hashem in a way that he was able to be out there in the world and teaching people how to serve Hashem. Teaching people outside there that were not involved in Avodas Hashem, showing them a way that you can in this world be involved in the world and serve Hashem just as well. He brought them under the wings of Hashem. He taught them about God. As it says about Abraham and Sarah, that they made those souls in Choron, that in Choron they transformed people to be dedicated to Hashem. Okay, Mesubir Barucha b'Medrash Chazal, as the Medrash tells us about this, Toldos Avidasi is given that what did Avraham Avinu do? What did Avraham and Sarah do? Vayikra Shem b'Shem Hashem Ke'Leilam. That Avraham went out into the world publicizing the word of Hashem, the name of Hashem. Wie the Chazal sagen, as the Chazal tell us, as Hischel lehidi ala'am she'ein roi lavid elul elikai ha'elam. He started teaching the people out there that the only one that we should be serving and davening to is Hashem. He would announce to everybody in the world, he would go to them and explain to them that there's one God and he's the one to serve, he's the one to daven to. And he would go from one country to another, gather people together, not just Jews, and would teach them about Hashem. Shenamar, as the pasuk says, Vayikra, Atikra Vayikra Elo Vayakri, which means not that he just called, but Vayakri, he made others call. He taught them how to be the ones that proclaim godliness in the world out there. What Avraham Avinu did, he started the path of making sure that God is not just Elikei HaShomayim, that Hashem is in heaven, but he also became then Elikei HaOretz, Shehirgaltiv B'fi Habriyos, that Avraham Avinu trained the people to be able to recognize Hashem. That was the Avodah of Avraham Avinu, to go out there in the world and train the world that there's a God out there. So that was Avraham Avinu. Yitzchak, what did Yitzchak do? Yitzchak is aber nicht haris in Chutz La'aretz. Yitzchak, though Hashem instructed him, I don't want you to leave Eretz Yisrael. You have to shchain ba'aretz. You have to stay in Eretz Yisrael. V'adarabba, hayois ere given ha'ilot mimo, since he was a sacrifice, hat gedarft gemusst bleiben in Eretz Yisrael. He had to stay in Eretz Yisrael. He couldn't leave Eretz Yisrael. Und euch dort gefinnen mehr nicht, als soll Aruiz gehen beim Koime Aprati und vernehmen sich mit anderen über Chutz, v'hainu als Seder Avidasi is gewähnt befnim. In his own land, in Eretz Yisrael, he can go from one person to another, but he can't leave Eretz Yisrael because he has to stay where he is, he has to stay put, so to say, and he has to be involved in learning and teaching to the people around him, not going out into the world. Und von die zwei Avos nehmen Eden beide Kaven in Avodah. And it's from Avraham and Yitzchak that we, Klal Yisrael, later on, are able to serve Hashem from both perspectives, which is, von Avraham Avinu haben alle Eden dahira und Sinnes Koyach auf der Avodah mit Zulas. From Avraham Avinu, we get the Koyach, we derive the strength to teach somebody else, to go out of ourselves and share what we know with another person and feel responsible to teach another person. Mibachutz, to go out of ourselves. Which means that every single Yid, even a Yid who's for the most part involved in learning, he sits in yeshiva, he sits in a shul, he sits and learns. Every Yid needs to know that he is empowered by Avraham Avinu to be able to go out into the world, even to a place that is not yet permeated with Kedusha. We have the strength to go out there and have that place filled with Kedusha, with holiness, learning there, davening there, doing a mitzvah there. It's our job as Yidden, and we are empowered by Avraham to reach out to the entire world, to go out everywhere, including like Avraham Avinu went outside of Eretz Yisrael. He didn't just remain home in his comfort level. He went out wherever he knew there was somebody, shared what he knew. This hanefesh asher also, to the point where he even created new people, people that weren't previously associated with God. He brought them back to Hashem. Mikarev zayin Eden LaHashem u'L'teirosai. He was, the first Chabadnik, the first Shliach. He went out there sharing with everybody, finding people that knew nothing about Yiddishkeit, knew nothing about Hashem, and brought them in. Didn't say to himself, I have no time for that, I have to sit and learn myself. He knew, I have a job, I have to reach out and teach others that don't yet know. And because Eden LaHashem u'L'teirosai k'may merasal kol ha'isik b'teira b'lvad u'kol ha'emer ein li el ha'teira, somebody who just is involved and immersed in Torah by himself and says, Ein li el ha'teira, I just want to be involved with learning Torah myself. That's what I want. I want to become a Rosh Yeshiva. I want to become a Goyin Olam. I want to become a big Lamdim. Don't confuse me with reaching out to others. So the Gemara says, somebody that says, I just want Torah, afilu Torah ein lo elo Torah ugmilas chasadim. Then you end up with nothing. You have to live a life with Torah and also gemilas chasadim, meaning sharing with others, helping others, permeating kedusha and godliness into the world out there. And that we get from who? From Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu was the first one that did that. He reached out to the world. So that's what we get from Avram Avinu. That's what was transmitted to all of Klal Yisrael through Avram Avinu. Und von Yitzchak Avinu, what do we get from Yitzchak? Nehmt ja der Riden der Hira und der Koyach in Aveda b'fnim. From Yitzchak, we all get the Koyach, we all get the power to work within ourselves, to elevate ourselves, to refine ourselves, to become better people, and not just think about only the people out there. Make sure you're a nice person, you're a good person, you're refined. Mamshich sein Kedusha in Inyani as euch die was Iker Asakum is bechutz. In other words, even somebody who's out there in the world, don't forget about yourself. Remember, you have to become a refined person just as well. And that's what Yitzchak tells us, and Yitzchak empowers us with that. Mamshich sein Kedusha in Inyani ha'olam, bringen war Avaya euch in Eden, was leis hat Hashem terasei. Even those people that are out there reaching out to others, darfen euch zij von Zeit zu Zeit sich absondern von dem Chutz und äußig sein bifnim. They too, very good that they're reaching out to others, but they can't forget about themselves. They have to sit down and learn. They have to sit down and daven. They have to sit down and do their own mitzvahs to become a refined person, to be able to be a good example for others. You have to make sure you yourself are on the right track. Und bei Eufen als Dämmelt haben sie nicht kein Schum Deiges, kein Schum andere Machshavas, dass man darf mit sein bei Zeiterosum Nosum. So what we're saying here is then that we are the inheritors of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And specifically from Avram and Yitzchak, Yaakov is a combination of the two, but from Avram and Yitzchak specifically, we inherit from Avram the idea of being able to reach out, and from Yitzchak we inherit the concept of turning in, recognizing that we have to do everything that we can for ourselves to become better people. So at the same time that we have to reach out to others, don't forget about yourself becoming a better person. At the same time that you're thinking about yourself, don't forget about reaching out to others. And that we're empowered from Avram and Yitzchak to be able to do the two of them. Rabbi says, so having said all of that, now let's go back to, as the Rebbe says, we mentioned many times, regarding the names of a Sedra. So the name of this Sedra is Parshas Toldos. What does Toldos mean? The children of. That's what this Parsha is called. Since the names of the Parsha are names that the Torah has given them these names, so it's an indication that this particular name has a special connection with the message of this Parsha. The proof of that is because in them was der Dafka unser Sedra wird angerufen Toldos. Our Parsha is called Parshas Toldos, right? El the Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram, Avram Toldos Yitzchak. So it's called Parshas Toldos. Remember a little bit earlier, what was the second Parsha in the Chumash? It was Parshas Noach. How does Noach begin? Ela Toldos Noach. So that's the second Seder. Why wasn't that Seder called Toldos? That Seder is called Noach. Our Seder is called Toldos. So obviously the name Toldos, which means the children of, has a special relationship with our Parsha, not with Parsha's Noach. Why? What's the special relevance to our Parsha? That's an indication that the Teuchen Kloli from the Seder in der Inyan von Toldos. This indicates that the message of our Seder is Toldos, which means Haylodas Banim, giving birth to children. That this is what you have, and now you transmit what you have to your descendants, to your children. And that's the message of this week's Parsha. The Hirab as Baruchnius is, and what's the message? What's the spiritual message of that? As jeder Yid darf uftan der Inyan von Toldos Baruchnius, that every Yid has to somehow be able to accomplish the Toldos, the children, having children in a spiritual sense, which means it is our job. What's our job? Toldos. Our job is to make another Jew. Our job is to affect another Jew, that if until now there's a person, you have a neighbor that isn't living a life of Torah and mitzvahs, our job is create another Jew. Make that person, that Jew, into somebody who follows in the ways of Hashem. By bringing him closer to Hashem, as the Chazal tell us that if you teach somebody else Torah, it's as if you gave birth to him. So for somebody who, God forbid, doesn't have any children, so that's spiritually, that's physically rather. But the Torah says spiritual is as important as physical. So you may not have physical children, but you can just as well have spiritual children, and that is by sharing words of Torah, sharing words of mitzvahs, affecting another Yid. It's as if you gave birth to that person. But that's the inyan from Pru'uravu, that's the concept of Pru'uravu, of multiplying. So physically it means having another child. Spiritually it means affecting another Yid and becoming closer to Hashem. And das is that's what Rashi tells us, that the word Toldos, which means children, Rashi says, when it says Toldos, Rashi comments and says, you know what Toldos mean? These children, which children are we talking about? Yaakov and Esav that are mentioned in this Parsha. That's what Rashi says. Das heißt, Toldos Yitzchak, that the children of Yitzchak Bashtain nish nor von azelche vazanen in the darge von Yaakov. Who are the children of Yitzchak? So you might say, who are the children of Yitzchak? Somebody like Yaakov is a child of Yitzchak, but somebody like Esav is a child of Yitzchak. What's the connection? What's the relevance? Now, medaf peil sein as euch hazoine was gefinnen sich an amay medumatze bald derech wie Esav. The point that Rashi wants to make is that Yitzchak has children that are currently Yaakov and Esav, and it's our job to take even the Esav, who is a child of Yitzchak, and transform him to become like a child of Yitzchak should be. So that they too should be permeated with the Parsha, with the Torah that Yitzchak has taught and Avraham has taught. Okay, so that's what the meaning is, that we have to have everybody affected by Avraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov, to be able to reach out to the world out there, not to forget about ourselves, even to think about the Esavs out there. That's what our job is. But the Rebbe says, but we need to understand something based on what we just said, and that is, on the one hand, we say we have to reach out to everybody, and at the same time we say Yitzchak didn't reach out to everybody. Yitzchak stayed locked up in Eretz Yisrael. Hashem tells him, do not leave, don't go out. So what does this mean? He was a child of Avraham. Why didn't he take what Avraham did and do the same? Reach out to everybody. And with him we find that quite the contrary, Zayin Ogezundet in Eretz Yisrael, he was separated from everybody, he was in Eretz Yisrael, remained in Eretz Yisrael, he didn't go out there, he remained in Eretz Yisrael. How's that possible? Why was that so? And in addition to this, this Sedre that speaks about specifically about Yitzchak, the way Yitzchak remained in Eretz Yisrael, this Sedre should be called Yitzchak. It should tell us about what Yitzchak did. Yitzchak stayed in Eretz Yisrael. He didn't go out there in the world like Avraham. So this Parsha should have been called Yitzchak. So the Rebbe said, so let's understand what this means. Let's understand what is going to, in other words, what we need to understand is how is it possible that on the one hand, we're expecting of every Yid to both work with himself, transform himself, as well as transform everybody out there. And at the same time, we say, no, Yitzchak, he needed to do both, but he was just stuck in with himself. He did not leave Eretz Yisrael. What about reaching out to everybody else? How did that work? Where does that fit in as a child of Avram? How is it possible that he didn't deal with that just as well? So the Rebbe says, we'll understand this by taking a look at what it is that's going to happen when Mashiach comes. What's going to happen when Mashiach comes? By understanding what happens then, was the Fun V'Perech moving B'Negei L'Avedas Yitzchak. By seeing what's going to happen when Mashiach comes, we'll have an understanding what it is that Yitzchak did. The Rambam, in talking about what's going to be when Mashiach comes, the Rambam says, Tziva Moshe mipi Agvura lokav es kol bo yiho'ilom l'kabel mitzvah shenistavu b'nei Noach. Rambam writes that Hashem commanded us, all the Jewish people, that it is our job to try to get everybody, even the Goyim, to follow the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noach. It's not that we can say to ourselves that, you know what, that's not my problem. I have to think about myself, I have to think about other Jews. The Rambam says it's an obligation on every single Yid to do all that he can to possibly get even Goyim to follow the Sheva Mitzvahs. And he also writes that the only reason that we don't find that happening throughout the ages is because Yidden didn't have the ability to. They were always sort of under the rulings of the Goyim. They didn't have the ability to teach them. If anything, it went the other way. But as the Rambam says, the Rebbe pointed out many times, when we do have the ability, it's a responsibility that we have. It's a responsibility, a clear responsibility of Torah, that we as Jews have to teach Yidden Torah and have to teach Goyim the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noach. But the halacha is, the Alin Yani halacha, and the ruling of Torah is, like everything of Torah, and in Yenitzchi b'chol hazman v'b'chol hamakoymis. This is a halacha that applies every time, at every point. Adi hanaga haritzuya in a moifin kiyam hamitzvahs and kol b'yoylam, that the appropriate way to act and the way Goyim should act is when das werd eivzei gepoilt durch Yidden. That the appropriate way is that Yidden should affect the Goyim, that they too should follow through with the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noach. That's the appropriate way, that Yidden should affect Goyim, should teach the Goyim how to do these things. So so based on that, the question arises, wie wird auch der Tafkid von Yidden durchgeführt werden, bis man der Lasse la v'vias Mashiach zitkenu. What's going to happen when Mashiach comes? Let's think about it. The Rambam führt als zwischen die Inyanim Neilem, was Mashiach wird uftun wird sein, wie Isakan es Ha'elam Kullu L'Avedas Hashem B'Yachad. The Rambam on the one hand writes that one of the things that Mashiach is going to do, he's going to teach the entire world to serve Hashem. Shenemar ki az epich al amim safa brura likri kulam b'shem Hashem l'avdi shechem echad. The Rambam writes that that's what Mashiach is going to do. He's going to teach the entire world, even the Goyim. But at the same time, the Rebbe says, the Shaila Zabir, Bibal, das alle Eden von Israelis werden von Golos Ha'amim. We know that when Mashiach comes, where are the Eden going to go? All the Eden are going to go to Eretz Yisrael. That's what's going to happen. We're all going with Mashiach to Eretz Yisrael, right? Und wollen sich gefunden al Admosam in Eretz Yisrael, and we'll be all in Eretz Yisrael. Und der Din is, abisman sheyad Yisrael tkifa, and at that point, when you didn't have control, so then is Umas Ha'elam zon sein afili Yeshavas Yishvisari or Ever Makan Makan Beschere dav sein Friya Sheyikabel all of Sheva Mitzvahs. When you didn't have the ability, they have to see, to be sure, to make sure to do all they can, that Goyim should do what they can as far as the Sheva Mitzvahs. So it's our responsibility, when we have control, to make sure that Goyim follow the Sheva Mitzvahs. Is wie wird es sein, als Iden seine mechanisch bei die Umais, bei Boye Eilam, wegen die Zayin Mitzvahs b'nei Noach. So the question is, the Rebbe says, how's that going to happen? Iden are going to be in Eretz Yisrael. The Goyim are going to be in Chutz La'aretz. How are we possibly going to affect the Goyim? Nobody's going to want to stand behind. Mashiach is not going to send shluchim to all parts of the world to transform the Goyim into people that follow Sheva Mitzvahs b'nei Noach. All the Yidden are going to be in Eretz Yisrael, and the Goyim in Chutz La'aretz are going to need to be affected by the Jews. How is that going to happen? You know, if you think about it, a similar question to what we're trying to understand regarding Yitzchak. Yitzchak was in Eretz Yisrael, didn't leave Eretz Yisrael, and still he had to have within him the ability to affect others as well. So the Rebbe says, you want to know how Yitzchak did it? Let's understand what's going to happen when Mashiach comes, when we're all going to need, the question is going to be about all of us. How are we going to affect the rest of the world? And once we understand that, we can perhaps apply that same answer to Yitzchak. So what's the answer? Das moving from the Psukim in Yeshayahu. Well, Psukim in Yeshayahu, in the Navi, in the prophets of Yeshaya, it says, that when Mashiach comes, there'll be the Beis Hamikdash that's going to build on the mountain. And v'noharu elov kol hagoyim v'holchu amim rabim v'amru l'chu v'nalu al har Hashem al Beis Elokei Yisrael. What's going to be when Mashiach comes? Everybody will see the greatness of Hashem, and all the goyim are going to want to come hearing about the greatness of Hashem. Let's go see what's going on over there. They're going to come to Eretz Yisrael to see, what are we hearing about? That's what the pasuk says. They're going to go to Eretz Yisrael. V'naru elov kol el beis Hashem. V'naru v'naila el har Hashem al beis Elokei Yaakov. They're going to go up to the mountain of Hashem. V'yareinu midrachov v'neilcha b'erchesav kimitzin tetzisera. And we're going to be taught from the ways of Hashem, because from Tzion, from Eretz Yisrael, Torah comes. V'shafat bin agoyim b'chitzu charbeisam b'syakelchu v'neilcha b'Hashem. It talks all about the fact that we are going to be a light unto the nations, and to the point where it's going to cause all the nations of the world to do all that they can to get on planes and to come to Eretz Yisrael to see the greatness of Hashem. That's what the Navi describes. So das heißt, das was lasst Lavi van euch Ha'elam lernen die Darke Hashem und in the Meivishten. So then what it says is that what's going to happen when Mashiach comes, yes, all the Goyim are going to learn from the Jews. They are going to learn from the Jews. But you ask, how's that possible? If Jews are in Eretz Yisrael and the Goyim are outside, how's that's going to happen? But nicht kommen durch them, was Iden will not rausgehen von der Art zum Akdeshel Chutz La'aretz zu the Goyim va'amim. So it's not going to be that Yidden are going to leave Eretz Yisrael, go to the Goyim and teach them there. Nor Heyois has the Maimah, the Meitzef in Eden, Eretz Yisrael, Beis Hamikdash, with them will sein betachlis hamayla v'ashleimus, but it's going to be the opposite. Yidden are going to be at the highest of levels. They're going to be a light onto the nations of the world. That Oir Hashem betorten leichten b'goli la'in koil. The light of Hashem is going to be so, it's going to be a luminary to the world. But das bederach memela pel sein goyim va'amim rabbi shebachol ha'elam bizas v'naru elov kol hagoyim. So it'll affect the goyim. They'll know, wow, look what's going on in Eretz Yisrael. Everybody's going to hear about it, and they're going to say, we got to go there. Let's see what's going on over there. So Yidden are not going to have to go to them. The goyim are going to come to us. That's what's going to happen when Mashiach comes. Kommt us, as la'asad lavi, weil Yidden nicht darf nach Rizgehen lechutz zu vernehmen sich mit kol ba'yi elam. That means that when Mashiach comes, as Jews, we're not going to have to go out to find the goyim. No, they will sein penuyim b'terasi v'chachmasai. You Yisrael Chacham Gedolim V'Yedim Dvarim Astum Yisik Das Beirim K'Vikei Achadim. Yidden are going to be immersed in learning and davening and doing all kinds of beautiful things. Und von deswegen will nicht Maschpiel sein auf die Umais. And doing such beautiful things, they're going to have effect on the Goyim. The Goyim are going to say, wow, let's go find out what they're doing. They're going to be such a luminary to the rest of the world that the Goyim are going to say, let's find out, let's go, let's visit, let's see what's going on. So that describes what's going to happen when Mashiach comes. That Yidden are going to be in Eretz Yisrael. They won't have to reach out to the Goyim, and still they're going to be able to affect the Goyim, because the Goyim are going to hear about them and are going to come to Eretz Yisrael. Yidden are not going to go to them, they're going to come to us. The Rebbe now concludes, similarly so is what happened with Yitzchak. What happened with Yitzchak? Yitzchak Seifen von Eishtal Toldos that is given nicht durch Geme Il Mamlocha. Yitzchak's Havayda was, as we said earlier, he didn't travel from one place to another. He was told, you have to stay, you have to sit in Eretz Yisrael. It wasn't that he traveled from one place to another like Avram Avinu did. That was Avram Avinu. He traveled. Yitzchak stayed in one place. Auf ein Ort in Eretz Yisrael hat zu sich zugezogen die Baye Elam. What Yitzchak did is he stayed in Eretz Yisrael, and the great things he was doing brought everybody to him, so that they come to him and hear about what he's doing and learn from him and observe him and watch him. Like you have a big fire and little sparks are brought into the fire. So too, this tremendous luminary, this tremendous light of Hashem that Yitzchak was accomplishing, was bringing into the world, was attracting everyone from the rest of the world around them. Without Yitzchak having to go to them, they were coming to Yitzchak. Hashem says to Yitzchak, you stay put and do what you have to where you are, and everybody will come to you. Avram Avinu started off, he had to reach out to everybody else to affect them, to make them realize they're missing something, to make them realize there's a God out there in the world that you have to look out for. When they realized that, then they realized, wow, now there's Yitzchak in Eretz Yisrael, and he's the guy that we have to go to. And they realized that there's somebody like Yitzchak that exists in Eretz Yisrael. So they had this tremendous urge. Let's go to Eretz Yisrael and figure out what's going on. So Yitzchak, at the same time that he was staying at his own place, not traveling anywhere, was also accomplishing the same thing that Avram Avinu was, affecting the other people, but affecting them in a different way. Avram was affecting them by reaching out to them. Yitzchak was affecting them by being such a luminary that they automatically came to him. But either way, others were being affected just as well. Und auf dem hat ihm der Rebischte gesagt, Alteret Mitzrayim Oshchein Ba'oretz. Hashem says to Yitzchak, that's what I want you to do. Your job is stay in Eretz Yisrael, stay put, and you are going to accomplish what you have to by just staying put in Eretz Yisrael, and others will be attracted to everything that you're doing. You have to bring godliness in Eretz Yisrael, Hashem says to Yitzchak. Hashem says to Yitzchak, your job is not to go down into Mitzrayim. Your job is to be in Eretz Yisrael, to get all the Kedusha that you can acquire in Eretz Yisrael, and become a light unto the nations, so that everybody looks up to you and they come to you because they realize there's something they have to acquire by coming to you and being affected by you. Und das ist der Hera Nitzchus von Avedis Yitzchak, was is Merumis Hashem Aseder Toldos, and this, the Rabbi concludes, is the special lesson that we have from the name of the Seder of Toldos that speaks about what Yitzchak was all about. So what's the lesson? Das was eigentlich die Mori auf die Taven, was Avedit Minis ist zum Fasten an Schösel Gottes Baruch belachten mit Makom und Neifstellen Toldos zusammen Terrasse, that On the one hand, you have those people that are doing good deeds. Those people that are doing good deeds have to not forget about, they too have to work with themselves and make sure that they're at the level that they need to be. Learn more, daven more, do mitzvahs, work with others, certainly, but don't forget about yourself so that when you go out there to work with others, you have what to give. You have how to affect others. Aber meint das nicht, dass sie treten damit abhassen schauen von seiner Schlichus und gar sei nicht Hashem und Terrasse in der Adarabe. Das ist eine Ikri in der Avodah. And so too the other way around, when Yitzchak thinks about affecting others, it doesn't mean that he's leaving his shlichus because all of a sudden he's stopping the learning and he's thinking about others. He's affecting others by becoming stronger within himself and being a lesson unto others, where others look at him and say, wow, that's exactly what I want to be like. I want to be the kind of person like you, that's such a Kiddush Shem Shamayim, that is Mekadosh Shem Shamayim, that does all the beautiful things. I see this frum Jew, he's walking down the street, says hello to people, he smiles at people, he helps out people, he picks up a package for somebody, he goes visit somebody. This is the kind of person that you're doing. It seems that you're doing things for yourself to become more of a refined person. You're not thinking about somebody else, thinking about yourself. But at the same time that you're thinking about yourself, you're affecting the people around you. The effect that you have on other people is unbelievable. So Hashem says to Yitzchak, that's what I want you to do. Remain in Eretz Yisrael. Become a refined person. But by becoming a refined person, you too are going to, in essence, affect the others. Not just affect those people out there like the Yaakovs out there, but as Rashi says at the beginning and states, Yaakov Esav, that Yaakov affects the Yaakov, that Yitzchak affects the Yaakov out there, as well as the Esav out there. Even somebody like Esav, that easy to say this, for us to say, for anybody to say, Esav, he's lost case. I can't work with him. I'm not even going to ask him to put on film because he's going to give me such a hard time. Why should I even try? So the Torah tells us this is what the life of Yitzchak was all about. Yaakov Esav ha'amurim beParsha. It was about Yaakov and Esav, that Yitzchak reached out to Yaakov and affected him. Yitzchak reached out to Esav and tried to affect him in the best possible way. And in the end, we find that when Esav dies, where is he buried? Together with Yitzchak. His head ends up in the same place, in the same cave as Yitzchak. So the bottom line is that we have to remember the responsibility that we carry. And as we know, along with the responsibility comes with, when we have a special, a responsibility, we carry a special responsibility, which means not only do we carry a special responsibility, but we have a special talent. When people are talented in a special way, we have to recognize along with that special talent comes a major responsibility. And the responsibility is to utilize the talent in our best way possible, and not just doing the easy job in affecting the Yaakov out there, but also to do whatever we possibly can to make sure that we recognize our job is also the Esavs out there and everybody in between, and it's our job to refine the world, to make the world a better world, and to thereby hasten the coming of Mashiach Tzidkeinu b'mheira b'yameinu. And that's what Toldos is all about. It's about the life of a Yid. The children of a Yid is Yaakov Esav ha'amurim beParsha. It's about recognizing there are different types of Jews out there, and it's our job to have an effect on everyone in the most positive way. Ashikoyach, everyone.
I have a little question.
Certainly.
From where do we see in the Parsha that that's what happens?
That what happens?
That Yitzchak actually affected the world in that manner.
Well, we see only from the perspective that, number one, we see he cares about Esav, right? Yitzchak was the one that wanted to give Esav the brachas. Don't we know that?
Right.
So we see that he wasn't just thinking about himself and thinking about the Torah and the spirituality and the ruchnius. He said, if there's even an Esav out there that's a child of mine, what can I do? Maybe there's some way that I can have an effect on him too.
Can we also see it through Avimelech?
We can see it somewhat through Avimelech as well. But clearly we see it with, and that's why the Parsha begins right away at the beginning and says, the Toldos, what's this Toldos all about? What's his sort of children all about? Yaakov ve'Esav ha'amur in the Parsha. It's about the Yaakov. Remember, the Parsha discusses the children of Yitzchak who are Yaakov and Esav. And Yitzchak cares about the two of them and does what he can for the two of them to do what they need. And that's why it says when Mashiach will come, the Olu Mashiach B'Hatzion Lishpeit Esar Esav, that ultimately Esav will fully become refined. It was started back then. Yitzchak didn't give up, and he'll get his way eventually. You know, many of the descendants of Esav today, I mean, there are many of descendants of Esav that are today. Gadim, we have many of them around. And these are all sparks of godliness that's out there that over the years have been refined.
Including uncles?
Including uncles. Although Esav himself didn't need to, Esav himself is referred to as a Yisrael Mumer. He's referred to as a Jew. He's not referred to as a Goy. But his descendants are, many of them are Goyim. Most of them are Goyim. But again, the point is, it's our job to affect certainly Toldos, our children, and even as the Rambam says, all the nations of the world. When we have the ability, it is our job to affect them in a way, not to teach them the 630 mitzvahs, but to see to it that each and every one of them follow through in the Zayin mitzvahs b'nei Noach. And that's our job. That's the responsibility that we carry. And that's why the Rebbe, in the last years made such a strong push about teaching the Zayin mitzvahs b'nei Noach.
That means there should be a push that we should learn them too.
Well, in order to teach it to others, we certainly need to know them.
We can't teach if we don't know.
Exactly. And the truth is, though, what we need to learn, I mean, the mitzvahs, the Zayin mitzvahs b'nei Noach are included those are all mitzvahs that are included for us as well. It's mitzvahs that we have, but we fulfill them differently than this Zayin mitzvahs b'nei Noach, than the nations of the world are obligated to do. It actually says the Zayin mitzvahs b'nei Noach is all about Yishuv ha'olam, about having a settled world, a world that people can live in. And that's what the Zayin mitzvahs b'nei Noach are all about. When we do our mitzvahs, we don't do it so that it become a better world. We do it because this is what Hashem wants of us. And this connects us to Hashem, period. But at the same time, our obligation is that we do what we can, that the Goyim should fulfill it for their reasons, that they need to. We can't always affect the Goyim, but when we can, we have to try to do what we can. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful Shabbos, Parshas Toldos, and the Eibusher should help. We should follow through in everything we can with our physical children, with our spiritual children, and affect everyone out there in the world that we can. Have a good Shabbos.
Thank you.
Shabbos.
Shabbos.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Which chedek was this from, Rabbi Rosenfeld? Which?
This was from Chelik. Hold on a second. Chelik. Chaf Hey.
Cafe. Okay.
Right. 25. Chelik 25.
Thank you.
123.
Could you send me the recording?
As soon as I get it, I'll send it to you.
Who's recording it now? You or
No,
Stern?
Sterny is.
So, but it went back to you now because she just signed
Yeah.
up.
No. She is. You know what? When it comes, I'll send it to you. Okay.
Good enough. Very good. Thank you.
Whichever way.
Go ahead.
One way or another, we'll get it.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, have a good Shabbos.
You have a good Shabbos.
Thank you.